My purpose in making this video is to address those members of the church who are teaching that Joseph Smith did not practice polygamy and that the whole practice was created by Brigham Young and others. In this video, I'll explain how if you believe Joseph Smith was a prophet of God, then you also have to believe he was a polygamist. And if you believe he wasn't a polygamist, then you really don't believe he was a prophet, and you are discrediting his prophecies and divine calling. Having said this, let me explain. I am not a polygamist, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has not practiced polygamy for over 100 years. There was a brief window of about 46 years where polygamy was practiced in the church. It was formally ended in 1890. If a member of the church were to be a polygamist today, they would be excommunicated. The church also does not believe polygamy is a requirement for exaltation. Rather than debating the historical sources about the origins of polygamy or the interpretations of the scriptures about polygamy, I want to address the points of Joseph Smith's prophecies about the future of the church and his personal calling and supervising of the leaders who would replace him. Part of Joseph Smith's calling was to establish the church and to lay the foundation for the restoration. Every major part of the church and its doctrine was restored by him. Joseph was also responsible to call and train his successors and to make sure they were men of God. They would be responsible to bring the gospel to the whole world after his death. If you believe Joseph was a prophet, then you would also have to believe that he chose Brigham Young and others to lead the church, which really means that God, through the Spirit, really called these men. In fact, we have the words of the Lord specifically calling Brigham Young in a revelation to Joseph Smith in 1841 and published before Joseph's death, where God says, "I give unto you, my servant Brigham Young, to be a president over the 12 traveling council, which 12 hold the keys to open up the authority of my kingdom upon the four corners of the earth, and after that to send my word to every creature." The polygamy deniers say we should believe what Joseph Smith said, while selectively choosing which of his statements we should believe. Should we believe what Joseph Smith said about Brigham Young being called by God in this revelation? Joseph spent much of the last few years of his life closely observing these men, teaching them the temple ceremonies and the doctrine that the rest of the church was not yet ready to receive. He was counting on them to administer the temple ordinances after his death. So if you believe Brigham Young and these men were evil, you must also believe that Joseph did not have the gift of discernment and could not recognize that all his closest friends and leaders were evil men, all villains just waiting to take over the church and institute the false doctrine of polygamy. Yet Joseph showed he did have this gift during his lifetime, when he detected and removed other bad men from the church within a few years. If he could detect them, then why not Brigham Young or these other supposedly bad men, especially since Brigham and others had been part of the church leadership for over 10 years. If they had been evil, Joseph would have detected them. The anti-polygamy crowd also has to believe that God didn't tell Joseph to replace these men, and that all of Joseph's work in teaching and training them was a wasted effort, since they just deceived him and took over the church anyway. If Brigham and others made up polygamy for their own interests and said it was from God, this would disqualify them from holding the priesthood and leading the church. This would also mean the temples they built and dedicated were not authorized, the ordinances invalid, the missionaries they called, everyone who was baptized or ordained by these missionaries would not have been done with God's approval or authority. This also means that the current prophets and apostles would not have authority or keys to lead the church, and neither would any priesthood holder, since we all trace our priesthood authority back to those early prophets. You can't say you love the temple and the missionary program, priesthood blessings and ordinances, while disparaging these early leaders, because all these things can be traced back to them. All these men who were close to Joseph and who led the church after his death said he was a polygamist. They were emphatic about it. Those who teach anti-polygamy will also say that Joseph Smith could still be a prophet who established the church, but the church fell into apostasy after his death. But this fails to consider that Joseph Smith made multiple prophecies about the future of the church and its destiny, none of which included any type of prophecy about a future general apostasy of the church. In fact, Joseph said the very opposite. In the Wentworth letter published long before Brigham Young was in charge, Joseph Smith said, "The standard of truth has been erected. No unhallowed hand can stop the work from progressing. Persecutions may rage, mobs may combine, armies may assemble, calumny may defame, but the truth of God will go forth boldly, nobly, and independent, till it has penetrated every continent, visited every clime, swept every country, and sounded in every ear, till the purposes of God shall be accomplished, and the great Jehovah shall say, the work is done." Should we believe what Joseph Smith said here or not? If Brigham and others took over the church, then this prophecy of Joseph Smith could not have come true. How could they fulfill these prophecies if they were evil? If they were wicked men, then they would be unhallowed hands, and they definitely would have stopped the work from progressing. Joseph also prophesied that his name would be had for good and evil among all nations. Should we believe what he said about that? If so, what church is responsible for telling the whole world about Joseph Smith so that his name is treated like this? Only one. Joseph also prophesied that the saints would become a mighty people in the midst of the Rocky Mountains, and the church would fill North and South America and the world. Should we believe what Joseph said about this? What church fulfilled this prophecy? The same church led by Brigham Young. You see, instead of hindering the work, they furthered the work and fulfilled these prophecies because they were the ones calling the missionaries and sending them out to the world to penetrate every continent and tell everyone about Joseph Smith and the restoration. If you want to say some other church has fulfilled this prophecy, then who is it? None of the other breakoff churches have even come remotely close to having this global prophetic reach. So claiming Joseph Smith was not practicing plural marriage means that all these men who carried the church forward were lying evil men, which means Joseph's own prophecies have failed. The church has failed, the work has failed, and Joseph himself never saw it coming. And God let it all happen, in spite of all the prophecies saying that it wouldn't happen. You can't believe the church is true today, and the temples and the priesthood are valid, and that all the men who led the church after Joseph were evil and lost God's authority. Both things cannot be true. President Hinckley said it this way: "The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has gone steadily forward and has never taken a backward step. That same authority which Joseph held, those same keys and powers which were the very essence of his divinely given right to preside, were by him conferred upon the 12 apostles with Brigham Young at their head. Every president of the church since then has come to that most high and sacred office out of the council of the 12. Each of these men has been blessed with the spirit and power of revelation from on high. There has been an unbroken chain from Joseph Smith. Tearing down all the prophets after Joseph Smith is tearing down Joseph Smith, because you are saying his prophecies failed, and he failed to detect this massive conspiracy that surrounded him. This means he either was a fallen prophet or never was a prophet at all. You become like David Whitmer and others who tried to thread the needle of claiming Joseph was a prophet, but only until he finished X or Y or Z, and then he became a fallen prophet. Or you become like the RLDS Church who tried to rewrite history, claiming Joseph never practiced polygamy, and that they were the rightful successors to Joseph, while failing to fulfill any of his prophecies about the future of the church in a significant way. Don't be modern-day apostates who tear down Joseph Smith while pretending to defend him. Either Joseph Smith was a prophet and a polygamist, or he was never a prophet. You can't have it both ways. The good news is it's not too late to repent of believing these false doctrines and to stop following those who teach them. I testify that Joseph Smith was a prophet and a polygamist, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the church he established and the only church carrying on the work he started. And now you understand. Pass it on. Thanks for watching.